The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as Olivia Foster's boot slipped on the crumbling limestone. And suddenly she was falling, her fingers scraping desperately against the rock face until they caught on a narrow ledge that bit into her flesh like teeth. Her body slammed against the cliff, knocking the air from her lungs, and she hung there 300 feet above the churning waters of the Green River, her arms screaming in protest as her fingertips bore the full weight of her body. She had been running from the MacAllister gang for 2 days straight through the Wyoming wilderness, ever since she witnessed them murder the federal marshal in Rock Springs. They wanted her dead, wanted to silence the only person who could identify them, and they had chased her relentlessly through the Badlands until she found herself trapped on this narrow mountain trail with nowhere left to run. The choice had been simple: risk the treacherous climb down the cliff face or wait for a bullet in the back. She had chosen the cliff, and now she was paying for that decision with every burning second that her fingers clung to the rock. "Hold on." The voice came from above, rough and urgent, and Olivia tilted her head back to see a man's silhouette against the bright June sky. He was moving fast, scrambling down the rock face with the confidence of someone who had spent his whole life in these mountains, his boots finding purchase on stones that looked too small to support a grasshopper. "Do not let go, you hear me? Do not let go." Olivia wanted to respond, wanted to tell him she had no intention of letting go, but her arms were shaking so badly she could barely think, let alone speak. Her fingers were slipping, the sweat on her palms mixing with the dust on the stone, and she could feel herself losing the battle against gravity. The man moved like quicksilver, dropping from one handhold to the next with a speed that seemed reckless, until Olivia realized he knew exactly what he was doing. He was close now, close enough that she could see his face. Sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds that were fixed on her with an intensity that made her believe he might actually reach her in time. "Just a little longer," he said, and his voice was steady even though he was moving fast, breathing hard from the exertion. "I am almost there." Olivia's left hand slipped, her fingers losing their grip entirely, and she cried out as her full weight shifted to her right hand. The pain was extraordinary, a white-hot agony that shot up her arm and into her shoulder, and she knew she had maybe seconds left before her strength gave out completely. Then his hand clamped around her wrist like iron. "I have got you," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her believe him, made her trust this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to save her life. "I will not let go. Do you understand me? I will not let go." He was braced against the rock face, his legs wedged into a crevice, one hand gripping an outcropping above his head, while the other held her wrist in a grip, so tight she could feel his pulse beating against her skin. His face was inches from hers now, and she could see the determination written in every line of his features, the absolute refusal to fail that blazed in his eyes. "Can you reach up with your other hand?" he asked, his voice calm despite the fact that he was supporting her entire weight while clinging to the side of a cliff. "Try to grab my arm." Olivia forced her left hand to move, every muscle in her body protesting as she reached up and wrapped her fingers around his forearm. His skin was warm beneath her touch, and she could feel the corded muscle beneath, the strength that was keeping her from plummeting to her death. "Good," he said. "That is good. Now I am going to pull you up, but I need you to help me. Use your feet, find somewhere to push off from." "Can you do that?" Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice, and began scrabbling at the rock face with her boots. She found a small ledge, barely more than a bump in the stone, and pushed up with everything she had left. The man pulled at the same time, his muscles straining with the effort, and suddenly she was rising, her body scraping against the cliff as he hauled her upward with a strength that seemed impossible. He did not stop pulling until she was level with him, their faces so close she could feel his breath on her cheek. For a moment they just hung there, both breathing hard, and Olivia found herself staring into those gray eyes and seeing something that made her heart pound even harder than the fear had. "Can you climb?" he asked, and she nodded again, not sure if it was true but knowing she had to try. "Stay close to me. Follow exactly where I go." The climb back up took an eternity. Every handhold was a battle, every foot of progress a victory, and through it all the man stayed beside her, guiding her, encouraging her, and catching her the 2 times her grip faltered. When they finally reached the top and collapsed onto solid ground, Olivia lay on her back staring up at the sky and shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "You are safe now," the man said, and when Olivia turned her head to look at him, she saw that he was sitting up watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Are you hurt?" "I do not think so," Olivia managed, her voice coming out hoarse and rough. "Thank you. You saved my life." "What were you doing down there?" he asked, and there was no accusation in his tone, just genuine curiosity mixed with concern. "That trail has been closed for years. Too dangerous." Olivia sat up slowly, her arms still trembling from the strain. She looked at the man properly for the first time, taking in his worn leather vest, the faded blue shirt beneath, the gun belt around his waist, and the battered hat that lay on the ground beside him. He looked like every other cowboy in Wyoming, except for those eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I was running," she said finally, deciding that this man who had risked his life for hers deserved the truth. "From the MacAllister gang. They killed Marshall Thompson in Rock Springs 3 days ago, and I saw it happen. They have been hunting me ever since." The man's expression darkened. "The MacAllisters, I know of them. Bad men, everyone." He stood up in one fluid motion and offered her his hand. "I am Yates Young. I have got a camp about a mile from here. You should come with me, get some food and water. Let me take a look at those hands." Olivia looked down at her palms and saw they were scraped raw, bleeding in places where the rock had torn through the skin. She had been so focused on survival she had not even felt the pain, but now it came rushing in, sharp and insistent. She took his offered hand and let him pull her to her feet, trying not to wince as her abused muscles protested. "Olivia Foster," she said. "And yes, I would appreciate that very much." They walked through the high desert landscape, the June sun beating down on them as they navigated between sage brush and juniper trees. Yates moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew this country intimately, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her about loose rocks. He kept glancing at her, and Olivia got the sense he was assessing her, trying to figure out what kind of woman climbs down a cliff face to escape murderers. His camp was simple but well organized. A small fire pit with stones arranged in a circle, a bedroll laid out beneath a canvas tarp strung between 2 trees, and his horse, a magnificent bay gelding, grazing nearby. Yates gestured for Olivia to sit on a fallen log near the fire pit while he retrieved a canteen and a worn cloth from his saddlebag. "Let me see your hands," he said, kneeling in front of her. His touch was gentle as he took her right hand in his, turning it over to examine the damage. "This is going to sting." He poured water over her palm, washing away the blood and dirt, and Olivia bit her lip to keep from crying out. His fingers were careful as he cleaned the wounds, his brow furrowed in concentration, and Olivia found herself studying his face, the way the late afternoon light caught in his dark hair, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his lips pressed together when he was focused on something. "How did you find me?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the pain and partly because she genuinely wanted to know. "On that cliff, I mean. What were you doing out there?" "Tracking mustangs," Yates said, starting on her other hand. "There is a herd that runs through these canyons, wild as the wind. I have been following them for 3 days, hoping to get close enough to see if there is a black stallion I heard about. That is when I heard you climbing, heard the rocks falling. By the time I got there and saw you, you were already hanging." He looked up at her, his gray eyes serious. "Another 30 seconds and I would have been too late." "But you were not," Olivia said softly. "You reached me in time." "Yeah," Yates said, and something in his voice made her pulse quicken. "I did." He finished cleaning her hands and wrapped them carefully in strips of clean cloth from his pack. His touch lingered for just a moment longer than necessary before he stood up and moved to build up the fire. Olivia watched him work, watched the way he moved with such economy of motion, nothing wasted, everything purposeful. "The MacAllisters," Yates said as he added wood to the fire. "How many of them are after you?" "5," Olivia said. "Maybe 6, I am not entirely sure. They caught up with me twice and I barely got away both times. I thought if I could make it into the mountains, lose them in the canyons, I might have a chance." "And then you ran out of trail," Yates said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So you tried to climb down instead of waiting for them to find you." "It seemed like a better option than a bullet," Olivia said with a wry smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Though when I was hanging there, I started to reconsider that assessment." Yates did not smile back. Instead, he came and sat beside her on the log, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Tell me what happened with the marshal." So Olivia told him. She told him about how she had been walking home from her job at the general store in Rock Springs, taking the back street because it was faster, and how she had heard voices coming from the alley beside the bank. She told him how she had peered around the corner and seen Marshal Thompson facing down 4 men, how the marshal's hand had been on his gun but he had not drawn it, had been trying to talk them down. She told him how the oldest MacAllister brother, Cyrus, had laughed and said something about lawmen who asked too many questions, and then he had shot the marshal twice in the chest before the man could even clear leather. "They saw me," Olivia said quietly, staring into the growing flames. "I turned to run and one of them shouted and then they were all coming after me. I made it to my boarding house, grabbed what I could carry and ran. I have been running ever since." 3 days, Yates said, and there was admiration in his voice. "You have been on your own in the wilderness for 3 days, staying ahead of the MacAllisters. That takes skill and nerve." "I grew up in Montana," Olivia said. "My father was a trapper. He taught me how to survive out here before he died. I am not helpless in the wild." "I can see that," Yates said, "but you cannot run forever. Eventually they will catch you or you will run out of country to run to." "I know," Olivia admitted. "I was trying to make it to South Pass City, to the federal marshal's office there. It is another 40 miles, and I am not sure I can make it, not with them on my trail." Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke again, his voice was firm, decided. "Then I will take you there. We will leave at first light, take the high trails where horses can move fast. If we push hard, we can make it in 2 days." Olivia turned to look at him, surprised. "You do not have to do that. You already saved my life once. I cannot ask you to risk it again." "You are not asking," Yates said, meeting her eyes. "I am offering. The MacAllisters are killers and thieves, and they deserve to hang for what they did to Marshal Thompson. You are the only witness, which means you are the only chance at justice. I will not let them silence you." There was something in the way he said it, something in the intensity of his gaze that made Olivia's breath catch. She realized that this man, this stranger who had grabbed her wrist and refused to let go even when it meant risking his own life, was not going to walk away from her. He had decided she was worth protecting, and she suspected that once Yates Young made up his mind about something, very little could change it. "Thank you," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They ate a simple meal of salt pork and beans as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Yates told her about his life, about how he had been working ranches since he was 14 years old, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. He talked about the country he had seen, the people he had met, the wild horses he had gentled, and the cattle drives he had been on. His voice was deep and warm, and Olivia found herself relaxing as she listened, the terror of the day slowly fading into something more manageable. When it was her turn, she told him about growing up in the mountains of Montana, about learning to track and hunt alongside her father, about her mother who had died when Olivia was 12, about coming to Rock Springs 2 years ago when she was 18, looking for a fresh start after her father's death. She told him about her job at the general store, about the little room she rented above the dress shop, about the quiet life she had built for herself in a town that was supposed to be safe. "Nothing is truly safe," Yates said. "Not in Wyoming in 1882. But you did your best, made a good life for yourself. That takes courage too." The night grew cold as it always did in the high desert, and Yates gave Olivia his bedroll while he sat with his back against a tree, his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. Olivia protested, said she could take a watch too, but he shook his head. "You need rest," he said firmly. "Tomorrow is going to be a hard ride and you have been running for 3 days. Sleep. I will keep watch." Olivia wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She lay down on the bedroll, pulling the blanket up to her chin, and watched Yates through half-closed eyes. He sat perfectly still, his gaze scanning the darkness, and she felt safer than she had in days knowing he was there. She woke several times during the night, startled by sounds that turned out to be nothing more than the wind or a night bird, and each time she looked over to find Yates still awake, still watching. Once, their eyes met across the dying fire, and he nodded at her, a silent reassurance that everything was all right, and she found herself smiling before she drifted back to sleep. Dawn came cold and clear, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale blue. Yates had coffee boiling by the time Olivia sat up, and he handed her a tin cup without a word. The coffee was strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. They broke camp quickly and efficiently, Yates moving with practiced ease as he packed his gear. He saddled his horse and then looked at Olivia with an apologetic expression. "We are going to have to ride double," he said. "It will slow us down some, but not as much as going on foot would." Olivia nodded, trying not to think about what it would be like to spend hours pressed against Yates's back, her arms wrapped around his waist. She had ridden double before, but never with someone who made her heart race the way this man did. Yates swung up into the saddle with easy grace and then reached down to pull Olivia up behind him. She settled in behind him, her arms going around his waist, and tried to ignore the way her pulse jumped at the contact. He was solid and warm beneath her touch, and she could feel the muscles in his back shift as he gathered the reins. "Hold on tight," he said. "We are going to move fast." They rode out of the canyon and up into the mountains, following trails that Olivia would never have seen on her own. Yates knew this country like other men knew the streets of their hometowns, guiding his horse around obstacles and up steep slopes with a confidence that spoke of years of experience. The horse, a sturdy animal with good wind, carried them both without complaint, settling into a ground-eating lope that ate up the miles. They stopped only twice during the morning, once to water the horse at a spring and once to give the animal a brief rest. Each time, Yates helped Olivia down with careful hands, and each time she found herself reluctant to let go of him, to step away from the warmth and safety of his presence. It was during the second stop, as they stood in the shade of a towering rock formation, that Yates spoke the words that had been weighing on his mind. "They are following us," he said quietly, his eyes on the trail behind them. "I saw dust about an hour ago, maybe 3 miles back." "Could be nothing, but I do not think so." Olivia felt her stomach clench with fear. "The MacAllisters." "Most likely," Yates said. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "They are pushing hard to catch us, which means they know you are not alone anymore. That is going to make them more dangerous. Desperate men do desperate things." "What do we do?" Olivia asked, hating the tremor she heard in her own voice. "We stay ahead of them," Yates said. "We have got a good horse, and I know shortcuts they do not. If we can make it to the little sandy river by nightfall, there is a place I know, a box canyon with only one way in. We can defend it if we have to, or slip out on foot if that is the better option. Either way, we will have the advantage." They rode hard through the afternoon, Yates pushing his horse as much as he dared. The mountains rose around them, vast and ancient, and Olivia found herself praying to a god she was not sure she believed in, asking for protection, for strength, for just enough luck to see them through. The sun was low in the sky when Yates pulled his horse to a stop on a ridge overlooking a green valley. Below them, a river wound through stands of cottonwood trees, and Olivia could see where it disappeared into a narrow canyon to the north. "There," Yates said, pointing. "That is where we are heading. Another hour and we will be there." They descended into the valley as the shadows grew long, the horse picking its way carefully down the slope. Olivia kept looking back, expecting to see riders cresting the ridge behind them, but the horizon remained empty. Maybe they had lost the MacAllisters after all. Maybe Yates's knowledge of the country had been enough to shake them. The box canyon was exactly as Yates had described it, a narrow entrance that widened into a circular space about 50 yards across, with walls that rose sheer on 3 sides. There was grass for the horse and a small stream that trickled down one wall, and Yates nodded in satisfaction as they rode in. "This will do," he said. "We can rest here, let the horse recover. If they find us, we will see them coming long before they can reach us." They made camp near the stream, and Yates built a small fire that he carefully shielded so the light would not be visible from outside the canyon. They ate more of the salt pork and the last of the beans, washing it down with cold water from the stream, and as night fell, Olivia found herself sitting close to Yates, taking comfort in his presence. "Tell me something," she said after a long silence. "Why are you doing this?" "Really doing this, I mean. You could have pointed me toward South Pass City and sent me on my way. You did not have to risk your life for a stranger." Yates was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, measured. "My father was a lawman," he said. "Sheriff of a little town in Colorado. When I was 16, some men robbed the bank and killed 2 people. My father went after them alone because the deputy was sick and there was nobody else. The outlaws ambushed him in a canyon not that different from this one. Shot him dead and left him for the buzzards." Olivia drew in a sharp breath, but Yates continued, his voice steady despite the pain she could hear beneath the words. "It took me 3 days to find his body. 3 days of searching while those killers got away clean. They were never caught, never faced justice for what they did. I was 17 when I buried my father, and I made myself a promise that day. I promised that if I ever had the chance to help someone get justice, To stop killers from getting away with murder, I would take it, no matter the cost. He turned to look at Olivia, and in the firelight his eyes were bright with emotion. So when you told me about Marshall Thompson, about what the MacAllisters did, I knew I had to help you. Because maybe if someone had helped get justice for my father, things would have been different. Maybe if there had been a witness who lived to testify, those men would have hanged instead of going free. I cannot change the past, but I can make sure you live to tell the truth about what you saw. That matters. Justice matters. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, moved by his words and by the depth of feeling behind them. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I am sorry about your father, but he would be proud of the man you have become. I am certain of that. Yates looked down at their joined hands, and when he looked back up at her, something had shifted in his expression. You are a remarkable woman, Olivia Foster. Beautiful and brave and stronger than you probably realize. I am glad I found you on that cliff. Glad I got to know you. I am glad you found me too, Olivia whispered. And then Yates was leaning toward her and she was leaning toward him, and when their lips met it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both testing the waters. But then Yates's free hand came up to cup her cheek, and Olivia sighed against his mouth, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget about the MacAllisters, about the danger they were in, about everything except the way Yates made her feel. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I should not have done that, he said, but there was no regret in his voice. We have got enough to worry about without complicating things. Maybe I wanted things to be complicated, Olivia said, surprising herself with her boldness. Maybe I have been wanting you to kiss me since the moment you grabbed my wrist and told me you would not let go. Yates laughed, a low, warm sound that made Olivia smile. Well then, I guess we are both in trouble. They sat together by the fire for hours, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses when the conversation lulled, and Olivia felt something blooming in her chest that she had not felt in years. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something more, something better. Hope for a future that included this strong, gentle man who had risked everything for her. Eventually, they settled down to sleep, Yates insisting that Olivia take the bedroll again while he kept watch. But this time she made him promise to wake her in a few hours so she could take a turn, and he reluctantly agreed. Olivia woke to Yates shaking her shoulder gently, his face tense in the pre-dawn darkness. They are here, he whispered. Outside the canyon. I heard horses about 10 minutes ago. Fear shot through Olivia like lightning, banishing the last traces of sleep. She sat up, her heart pounding, and saw that Yates already had his rifle in hand. How many? I am not sure. At least 4, maybe more. They are not rushing in, which means they know this is a bottleneck. They will be cautious. He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. I need you to stay here, stay low. If shooting starts, get behind those rocks over there. Understand? Yates, Olivia said, grabbing his arm, please be careful. He smiled at her, and despite the danger, despite everything, it was a genuine smile. I will. I did not save you from a cliff just to let the MacAllisters finish the job. He moved toward the canyon entrance, staying low, using the rocks for cover. Olivia watched him go, her hands clenched into fists, her wrapped palms aching. She wanted to help, wanted to do something, but she knew she would only be a distraction. All she could do was trust that Yates knew what he was doing. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky when a voice called out from beyond the canyon entrance. You in there? We know you have got the girl. Send her out and we will let you ride away. No harm done. Yates did not answer, and Olivia held her breath, waiting. "We just want to talk to her," the voice continued. It sounded reasonable, almost friendly, but Olivia recognized it. Cyrus MacAllister, the man who had shot Marshall Thompson. "She is confused about what she saw. We just want to clear things up." "The only thing that is going to be cleared up is your necks at the end of a rope," Yates called back, his voice carrying clearly through the morning air. "She saw what she saw, and she is going to testify to it. Turn around and ride away while you still can." There was a long pause, and then Cyrus laughed. "That is not going to happen, friend. We came too far to give up now. Tell you what, though. You send the girl out and we will make it quick, painless. We got no quarrel with you." "And I am telling you I have got a big quarrel with men who shoot lawmen and hunt women through the wilderness," Yates shot back. "You made your choices. Now live with them, or die with them. Makes no difference to me." "Your funeral," Cyrus said, and the false friendliness was gone from his voice, replaced by cold menace. "Boys, spread out. Watch for him to rabbit out the back." "There is no back way out," another voice said, younger, uncertain. "Jessup scouted it. This is a box canyon." "Then we have got them trapped," Cyrus said, and Olivia could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Come on. Let us finish this." The first shot rang out, echoing off the canyon walls, and Olivia saw rock chips fly from the wall near where Yates was crouched. He returned fire immediately, the crack of his rifle sharp and loud, and she heard a cry from outside the canyon. "He hit Jessup," someone yelled. "He hit him in the leg." More shots followed, a barrage of gunfire that made Olivia press herself flat against the ground behind the rocks where Yates had told her to hide. She could see him moving, changing position after every shot, making it hard for the MacAllisters to pin him down. He was firing with careful precision, not wasting ammunition, making every bullet count. The fight went on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Yates was outnumbered, but he had the advantage of position, and he was using it brilliantly. The MacAllisters could not rush the entrance without exposing themselves, and every time one of them tried to get a better angle, Yates drove them back with accurate fire. But Olivia could see the problem. Yates was trapped just as surely as she was. He could hold the entrance, but he could not leave, and eventually the MacAllisters would either find a way around or simply wait him out. They had time on their side. All they had to do was be patient. Then she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the clatter of rocks from high up on the canyon wall. She looked up and saw one of the MacAllister men climbing down the sheer face, using a rope, working his way toward a ledge that would give him a clear shot at Yates from above. "Yates!" Olivia screamed. "Above you!" Yates looked up, saw the danger, and twisted to bring his rifle to bear. But the MacAllister man was already in position, already aiming, and Olivia saw in that frozen moment that Yates could not get a shot off in time. She did not think. She grabbed a rock the size of her fist and threw it with all her strength. The rock flew true, striking the MacAllister man in the shoulder just as he pulled the trigger. His shot went wild, the bullet ricocheting off stone, and then he was falling, the rope slipping through his hands. He hit the ground hard 30 feet below and did not move. Yates spun back to the entrance and fired 3 times in rapid succession. Olivia heard curses, heard the sound of men scrambling away, and then silence. "Cyrus," Yates called out, "you have lost 2 men. How many more you want to lose before you admit you are beat?" "This is not over," Cyrus shouted back, but Olivia could hear the uncertainty in his voice now. "We will wait you out. You cannot stay in there forever." "Maybe not," Yates said. "But I can make you pay dearly for every foot you try to advance. And when I run out of bullets, I've got a knife and I am real good with it. So come on, Cyrus. Come on in here and see what happens." There was a long silence, and then Olivia heard the sound of horses moving away, heading back the way they had come. Yates waited, tense and alert, his rifle ready, but the sounds faded into the distance and did not return. After what felt like an eternity, Yates lowered his rifle and turned to look at Olivia. His face was smudged with powder smoke, and there was a graze on his cheek where a bullet had come too close, but he was grinning. "That was some throw," he said. "You saved my life." Olivia stood on shaking legs and walked over to him. "I guess that makes us even." Yates laughed and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, could feel the adrenaline still coursing through both of them. "We make a good team," he said into her hair. "A very good team." They stayed in the canyon just long enough to make sure the MacAllisters were truly gone, and then they rode out, both of them on high alert. Yates led them on a twisting route through the mountains, doubling back twice to make sure they were not being followed, and by the time they stopped for a brief rest, Olivia was confident they had lost their pursuers. "They will not give up," Yates said as they watered the horse. "They will regroup and come after us again, try to get ahead of us and set up an ambush. We have to move fast." They rode through the rest of that day and into the night, stopping only when the horse was too tired to continue. Yates found them a sheltered spot in a stand of pine trees, and they made a cold camp, not daring to risk a fire. They ate jerky and hardtack from Yates's supplies, and then Olivia insisted that Yates get some sleep while she kept watch. She sat with his rifle across her knees, staring out into the darkness, and tried not to think about how close they had come to dying. But her mind kept replaying the fight, kept seeing Yates moving with deadly efficiency, kept remembering the way he had put himself between her and danger without hesitation. This man who had been a stranger 2 days ago was now the most important person in her world, and the thought of losing him made her chest ache. When Yates woke a few hours later, he found Olivia still awake, still watching, and he sat up with a rueful expression. "You were supposed to wake me." "You needed the rest more than I did," Olivia said. "Besides, I have been thinking about what happens after we get to South Pass City, after I testify and the MacAllisters are dealt with." She turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the darkness. "What happens to us?" Yates was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he said finally. "I have spent my whole adult life drifting from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. I never thought I wanted anything different, but then I met you and now I am not so sure." "I do not want to go back to Rock Springs," Olivia said. "Even if the MacAllisters are in jail, even if I am safe, I do not think I can go back to that life. It feels too small now, too confining. These past few days, despite the danger, I have felt more alive than I have in years." "I know what you mean," Yates said. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Maybe when this is over we could figure out something together. Find a place where we both want to be. Make a home." Olivia's heart soared at his words. "I would like that very much." They rode on at first light, pushing hard for South Pass City. The country gradually changed as they descended from the high mountains, the pines giving way to sage and scrub grass. By mid-afternoon they could see the town in the distance, a collection of buildings clustered in a valley where the Oregon Trail crossed the Continental Divide. They were 5 miles out when Yates pulled his horse to a sudden stop, his body going tense. "Riders," he said quietly. "Coming from the south, moving fast, 3 of them." Olivia felt her stomach drop. The MacAllisters, maybe, or maybe just cowboys heading to town. Yates studied the approaching riders for a moment, then cursed under his breath. "It is them. I can see Cyrus's red shirt." "They got ahead of us somehow, must have pushed their horses to the breaking point." "What do we do?" Olivia asked, looking around desperately. They were in open country here, with nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. The town was too far away to reach before the MacAllisters cut them off. Yates's jaw set in a hard line. "We go through them. We are too close to give up now. Hold on tight and do not let go no matter what happens." He kicked his horse into a gallop, heading straight toward the oncoming riders. Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his back, feeling the powerful muscles of the horse bunching and releasing beneath her. The wind whipped her hair back, and she could hear Yates talking to his horse, encouraging the tired animal to give just a little more. The MacAllisters saw them coming and spread out, trying to block their path. Olivia recognized Cyrus in the middle, his face twisted with rage, his gun already drawn. On either side of him were two more men, both armed, both ready to kill. Yates drew his pistol and fired without slowing down, and one of the MacAllister men jerked in his saddle and fell. Cyrus and the remaining outlaw returned fire, bullets whining through the air, and Olivia felt Yates flinch as one of them found its mark. "Yates!" she cried, feeling wetness on her hands where she gripped his waist. "I am all right," he gritted out, but Olivia could hear the pain in his voice. "Just hold on." They were almost through the line now, almost past the MacAllisters, and Yates fired again. The second outlaw's horse went down, throwing its rider, and then they were clear, galloping toward South Pass City with only Cyrus in pursuit. Olivia looked back and saw Cyrus coming after them, his face a mask of fury, his gun raised. She saw the muzzle flash, heard the shot, and felt Yates jerk again. The horse stumbled, and for a terrifying moment Olivia thought they were going down, but Yates somehow kept them upright, kept them moving. "Almost there," he said, his voice strained. "Almost there." The town was close now, close enough that Olivia could see people in the streets stopping to stare at them. Close enough that she could see the marshal's office, the star painted on the window. Just a few hundred more yards. Another shot rang out, and this time the bullet struck the horse. The animal screamed and went down, and Olivia and Yates were thrown clear. Olivia hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs, and for a moment she could not move, could not think. Then she heard Yates calling her name, and she forced herself to roll over. Yates was on his feet, swaying, blood staining his shirt in two places. He had his gun in his hand, and he was facing Cyrus MacAllister, who was dismounting 20 yards away with murder in his eyes. "This ends now," Cyrus said, walking toward them. "You should have minded your own business, Cowboy." "Justice is everyone's business," Yates said. His voice was weak, but his gun hand was steady. Olivia struggled to her feet, positioning herself behind Yates. She could see people running toward them now, could see a man with a marshal's badge pushing through the crowd, but she knew he would not reach them in time. "Last chance," Cyrus said to Yates. "Walk away, I will make it quick for the girl." "No," Yates said simply. Cyrus drew. He was fast, faster than Olivia expected, but Yates was faster. Both guns fired at the same time, the reports so close together they sounded like one. Cyrus staggered backward, a red stain spreading across his chest, and then he fell. Yates dropped his gun and collapsed to his knees. Olivia was beside him instantly, catching him as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. His shirt was soaked with blood, and she could see at least 2 bullet wounds, maybe more. "Yates," she said, her voice breaking. "Yates, hold on, help is coming." "I told you," he said, looking up at her with those gray eyes she had come to love. "I told you I would not let go, got you here, got you safe." "You did," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "You did, and now you have to stay with me, do you hear me? You have to stay." The marshal arrived, dropping to his knees beside them, and Olivia found herself telling the story in a rush, the words tumbling over each other. Marshall Thompson, the murder, the MacAllisters hunting her, Yates saving her life again and again. The marshal listened, his face growing grimmer by the moment, and then he was shouting orders, sending men to check on the fallen outlaws, calling for the doctor. The doctor came, a gray-haired man with gentle hands, and he examined Yates right there in the street. "We need to get him inside," he said. "Now." They carried Yates to the doctor's office, and Olivia refused to leave his side. She held his hand while the doctor cut away his shirt, while he probed the wounds and extracted the bullets, while he cleaned and bandaged and did everything he could to save the life of the man who had saved hers. "He has lost a lot of blood," the doctor said when he was finally done. "The next 24 hours will tell us if he is going to make it. All we can do now is wait and pray." Olivia sat beside Yates's bed and did both. She prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life, bargaining with God, promising anything if he would just let Yates live. She held his hand and talked to him, telling him about all the things they were going to do together when he recovered, all the places they would see, all the life they would build. And through it all, she did not let go of his hand, not for a moment. The fever came that night, and Yates thrashed and mumbled, lost in delirium. Olivia bathed his face with cool water and whispered to him, anchoring him to the world with the sound of her voice. When he cried out for his father, she told him it was all right, that justice had been served, that he could rest now. When he called her name, she was there, reassuring him that she was safe, that he had succeeded, that she was not going anywhere. Dawn came and the fever broke. Yates opened his eyes, clear and lucid, and looked at Olivia with wonder. "You are still here." "I told you I was not going anywhere," Olivia said, smiling through her tears. "You saved my life, Yates Young. Did you really think I would leave you, the MacAllisters?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Dead or in custody, it is over. You did it. We did it." Yates smiled, and then he slept, a real sleep this time, peaceful and healing. Olivia finally allowed herself to relax, to believe that he was going to be all right. The marshal took Olivia's statement that afternoon, writing down everything she had seen the night Marshall Thompson was killed. He listened carefully, asked detailed questions, and when she was done, he nodded in satisfaction. "We had been building a case against the MacAllisters for months," he said. "But we could never get anyone to testify against them. People were too afraid. Your testimony, combined with the evidence we already have, will be enough to make sure the survivors hang." "How many survived?" Olivia asked. "Two. The one whose horse you shot out from under him, and one who was wounded in the canyon. The rest are dead, including Cyrus." The marshal looked at her with respect. "You have been through hell, Miss Foster, but you never gave up. That takes real strength." "I had help," Olivia said, looking toward the room where Yates was sleeping. "I would not have made it without him." "He is a good man," the marshal said. "You are lucky to have found each other." Olivia spent the next week at Yates's bedside, watching him slowly recover his strength. The doctor said it was a miracle he had survived, that most men would have died from blood loss alone. But Yates was tough, toughened by years of hard living in a hard land, and he fought his way back to health with the same determination he brought to everything else. When he was finally strong enough to sit up and eat solid food, Olivia broached the subject that had been on her mind. "I testified," she said. "The survivors are going to hang. It is really over." "Good," Yates said. "That is good." "So now we need to talk about what happens next," Olivia said, taking his hand. "About what you said in the mountains about finding a place together. Did you mean that?" "Every word," Yates said seriously. "I have been thinking about it a lot these past few days. About you, about us, about what kind of life we could build," He paused, seeming to gather his courage. Olivia Foster, I know we have not known each other long, less than 2 weeks, in fact, but in that time you have become the most important person in my world. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found the home I have been searching for all my life. I do not have much to offer you. No land, no money, just a horse and a saddle and 2 good hands, but I am asking you anyway. Will you marry me? Olivia felt joy burst in her chest like a firework. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, of course I will marry you. Yates pulled her down for a kiss, and despite his injuries, despite everything they had been through, it was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in South Pass City. The marshal gave Olivia away, and the doctor stood up as Yates's best man. And half the town turned out to witness the wedding of the woman who had brought down the MacAllister gang and the cowboy who had saved her life. Olivia wore a simple blue dress that she bought with money she earned working at the general store, and Yates wore his Sunday best, which was not much different from his everyday clothes except cleaner. But when they stood together at the altar and spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever trials lay ahead, Olivia thought she had never seen a more handsome man. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in South Pass City, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia felt completely safe, completely at peace. She lay in Yates's arms, listening to his heartbeat, and marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, she had been alone in the world, working a job that paid barely enough to survive, with no prospects and no hope for anything better. Now, she was married to a man she loved beyond measure, a man who had proven again and again that he would do anything to protect her. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Olivia said. "About how close I came to dying on that cliff and how you grabbed my wrist and would not let go. You changed my whole life in that moment." "You changed mine too," Yates said. "I was drifting before I met you, just going through the motions. Now I have got purpose. I have got something to fight for, to live for." "So what do we do now?" Olivia asked. "Where do we go?" "I have been thinking about that," Yates said. "The marshal offered me a job as a deputy. Says he needs good men, men who are not afraid to stand up to outlaws. The pay is not great, but it is steady, and it comes with a house. We could stay here in South Pass City, build a life." Olivia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Is that what you want? To be a lawman like your father?" "I think maybe it is," Yates said slowly. "I think maybe that is what I have been moving toward all along without realizing it. A way to make sure that what happened to my father does not happen to other people. A way to make a difference." "Then that is what we will do," Olivia said firmly. "We will stay here and you will be the best deputy this territory has ever seen, and we will build a home together." Yates pulled her down for another kiss, long and sweet. "I love you, Olivia Young. God, I love you so much." "I love you too," Olivia whispered against his lips. "Forever." They settled into life in South Pass City with surprising ease. Yates took the deputy position and proved to be a natural lawman, fair but firm, with a reputation for courage that spread quickly through the territory. Olivia found work at the general store, using her experience from Rock Springs, and before long she was managing the whole operation. They lived in the house that came with Yates's job, a small but solid structure on the edge of town. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but Olivia made it into a home, filling it with furniture they bought piece by piece, curtains she sewed herself, and small touches that made it uniquely theirs. Yates built her a garden in the backyard, and she spent her evenings tending vegetables and flowers, finding peace in the simple act of making things grow. Life was good, better than either of them had dared to hope. They had each other, they had work that mattered, and they had a community that respected them. The nightmares about the MacAllisters faded, replaced by dreams of the future. A year after their wedding, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Yates over dinner one evening, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then a huge grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop that probably woke half the town. He picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, and then he set her down gently and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart melt. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, even though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Yates said. "I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed." Their son was born the following spring, on a warm May morning when the wildflowers were blooming in the mountains. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Yates, pacing outside the room, was certain he was going to lose both of them. But Olivia was as strong in childbirth as she had been hanging from that cliff, and when the doctor finally emerged with a squalling baby boy in his arms, Yates nearly collapsed with relief. They named him Thomas, after Yates's father, and from the moment Yates held his son for the first time, he was utterly besotted. He would sit for hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the way Thomas's face scrunched up when he cried, the surprisingly strong grip he had when he wrapped his hand around Yates's finger. "He is perfect," Yates would say, over and over, and Olivia would laugh and agree, even when Thomas was screaming at 2 in the morning and refusing to be consoled. Motherhood suited Olivia. She took to it with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning as she went, making mistakes but learning from them. She watched her son grow and change, marveling at every milestone, and felt a contentment she had never known was possible. When Thomas was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a cold December night, arriving so fast the doctor barely made it in time. They named her Clara, after Olivia's mother, and if Yates had been besotted with his son, he was completely helpless against his daughter. She had Olivia's eyes and Yates's stubborn chin, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from day one. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved books and learning, while Clara was all fire and determination, always climbing things she should not climb and asking questions that left Yates scrambling for answers. They filled the little house with laughter and noise and love, and Yates and Olivia watched their children grow with hearts full of gratitude. Yates eventually became marshal after his predecessor retired, and he proved to be just as good at the job as everyone expected. He was tough when he needed to be, but he also had a reputation for giving young men in trouble a second chance, for seeing the good in people even when they had made mistakes. The town prospered under his watch, growing from a rough mining settlement into a proper community with a school and a church and families who put down roots. Olivia opened her own store when the owner of the general store retired, and it became the gathering place for the women of South Pass City. She employed several women who needed work, paying them fair wages, and became known throughout the territory for her business acumen and her generous heart. On their 10th anniversary, Yates took Olivia on a ride into the mountains, back to the place where they had first met. They stood at the top of the cliff where she had been hanging, where he had grabbed her wrist and changed both their lives forever, and they looked out over the vast Wyoming landscape spread before them. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not been there that day?" Yates asked, his arm around Olivia's waist. Sometimes, Olivia admitted, but not often. I prefer to think about what did happen, about the life we have built together. It is a good life, Yates said, better than I ever imagined possible. It is, Olivia agreed. We have been blessed. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, remembering. Then Yates took Olivia's hand and led her back to their horses, back toward home, back toward the life they had made together in the years since that desperate day on the cliff. Thomas grew up to be a lawyer, attending college in Denver and returning to Wyoming to practice. He inherited his father's sense of justice and his mother's sharp mind, and he became known as a fierce advocate for those who could not afford fancy representation. He married a teacher named Emma, and they gave Yates and Olivia 4 grandchildren who filled their lives with even more joy. Clara, true to her nature, refused to follow a conventional path. She learned to ride as well as any cowboy, and by the time she was 16, she was helping her father track outlaws through the mountains. She eventually became one of the first female deputy marshals in Wyoming, much to Yates's mixed pride and worry. She married late, at 26, to a rancher named Samuel, who was one of the few men brave enough to take on a woman as independent and strong-willed as Clara. They had 2 children and ran a successful cattle operation in the mountains. As Yates and Olivia grew older, they began to slow down. Yates retired from the marshal's office when he was 55, handing over the badge to a young man he had trained, who reminded him a lot of himself. Olivia sold her store to one of the women who had worked for her for years, confident it was in good hands. They spent their later years much as they had spent their early ones, together. They took long rides in the mountains, visited their children and grandchildren, and sat on their porch in the evenings watching the sun set over the peaks. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with lines that spoke of years spent laughing and loving and living. On their 40th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Yates made a speech that had everyone crying and laughing at the same time. 40 years ago, he said, I was tracking wild horses through a canyon when I heard a sound that changed my life. I looked up and saw a woman hanging from a cliff, her fingers the only thing between her and a long fall. I climbed down to her, I grabbed her wrist, and I made her a promise. I told her I would not let go, and I have kept that promise every day since. Through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, I have held on to her and she has held on to me. That is what marriage is, I think. It is grabbing hold of each other and refusing to let go no matter what the world throws at you. He turned to look at Olivia, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Young. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for 40 years of happiness. Thank you for our children and grandchildren. Thank you for being brave enough to hang on when it mattered most. Olivia stood and kissed him, not caring that their whole family was watching. Thank you for grabbing my wrist, she said. Thank you for not letting go. They lived into their 70s, both of them remarkably healthy for their age. Yates attributed it to clean mountain air and good Wyoming living, while Olivia said it was because they had each other. They were probably both right. When Yates finally passed, quietly in his sleep at the age of 76, Olivia felt like half her heart had been torn away. But she took comfort in knowing that he had lived a full life, a good life, and that he had been happy until the very end. She lived 2 more years, spending her time with her family, telling stories about the man she had loved, making sure that her grandchildren knew the legacy of courage and integrity their grandfather had left behind. When Olivia died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her children, she was buried next to Yates in the cemetery on the hill overlooking South Pass City. Their graves sat side by side beneath a large cottonwood tree, the headstone simple but elegant. Yates's Reed, a man who kept his promises. Olivia's Reed, a woman who never let go. But their real legacy was not in stone. It was in the children they had raised, the grandchildren who carried their names, the great-grandchildren who would grow up hearing stories about the cowboy and the woman he saved on a cliff in Wyoming. It was in the lives they had touched, the people they had helped, the difference they had made in their corner of the world. Years after they were both gone, people in South Pass City still told the story of Yates Young and Olivia Foster, of how they met on a cliff face and fell in love during a desperate race to escape killers, of how they built a life together that became a foundation for generations to come. It became the kind of story that parents told their children, a reminder that love can bloom even in the hardest circumstances, that courage and integrity matter, and that sometimes the best things in life come from refusing to let go when everything tells you to give up. The little house on the edge of town where they had raised their family was eventually bought by Thomas and Emma, who restored it and filled it with their own children and grandchildren. The porch where Yates and Olivia had spent so many evenings was rebuilt, and new generations sat there watching the sun set over the mountains, hearing stories about the man who grabbed a woman's wrist on a cliff and the woman who trusted him enough to hold on. Clara kept her father's badge, displaying it proudly in her home, and she made sure her own children understood the responsibility that came with the name they bore. She told them about their grandfather's courage, their grandmother's strength, and the day when two strangers found each other in the wilderness and changed each other's lives forever. In South Pass City, the story became legend, embellished and retold until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But the core of it remained true. A woman in danger, a man who refused to let her fall, and a love that grew from desperation into something lasting and beautiful. The mountains where it all began remained unchanged, indifferent to human drama, standing as they had stood for millennia. But the cliff where Olivia had hung by her fingertips became a landmark, a place where young couples would hike to on anniversaries, where they would stand and look out over the vast Wyoming landscape and promise each other to never let go, no matter what challenges they faced. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings when the light slanted golden across the rocks, it was almost possible to imagine a young woman clinging desperately to a ledge, and a young man scrambling down to save her, his hand reaching out to grab her wrist, his voice steady and sure as he promised not to let go. It was almost possible to feel the love that bloomed in the midst of danger, the connection that formed between two souls who found each other at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place. The story of Yates and Olivia became more than just history. It became a symbol, a reminder that love can conquer fear, that courage can overcome impossible odds, and that sometimes the most important decision we ever make is to hold on when everything tells us to let go. Their legacy lived on in every person who heard their story and decided to be braver, to love harder, to never give up on the people who matter most. In the end, that was the real miracle of that day on the cliff. Not just that Yates saved Olivia's life, though that was certainly miraculous enough. The real miracle was that in the midst of terror and danger, two people found each other and chose to hold on. They chose to trust, to hope, to believe that together they could face whatever came next. And that choice, made in a split second on a rocky ledge 300 feet above the Green River, echoed through generations, touching lives that would never even know the names of the cowboy and the woman he saved. Their love story became Wyoming's love story, a tale of the frontier spirit, of the courage and determination that built the West, It was a story about second chances and new beginnings, about finding home in another person rather than a place, about the transformative power of refusing to let go when someone needs you to hold on. And if you visit South Pass City today, if you talk to the old-timers who remember hearing the story from their grandparents, they will tell you that love like that never really dies. It lives on in the mountains and the rivers, in the wind that whispers through the sage, in every sunset that paints the sky with impossible colors. It lives on in the hearts of people who believe that courage matters, that integrity matters, that love matters most of all. The story of Yates Young grabbing Olivia Foster's wrist and refusing to let go became more than just a moment in time. It became eternal, a testament to the best parts of human nature, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found in the simple act of holding on to each other and refusing to give up. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind.